Afternoon, Frank Warwick. 13 people are reported to be buried alive.
Hopes of saving 13 people trapped in a cave collapse on the Nullarbor.
A massive rescue underway to free 13 trapped cavers.
They went up this road and into this cave, and that's the last time they were seen.
A group of 15 curious adventurers embarked on a journey that would forever be remembered as amongst the worst cave tragedies. Little did they know that their quest for discovery would soon descend into a harrowing descent into darkness and despair. This is the story of the Pannikin Cave Disaster, a tale that unfolds deep within the unforgiving heart of the earth. The Pannikin Plains Cave is located in the Nullarbor Plain region of southern Australia, with passages stretching for over 5 miles. Pannikin Plains Cave is one of the longest caves in Australia. Features include spectacular stalactites and stalagmites, intricate cave pearls formed by dripping water, and deep underground pools. One of the most notable chambers is the Grand Hall, an enormous cavern over 1.5 miles. This captivating subterranean landscape drew in adventurous cavers such as Andrew White and his team from around the globe. Driven by the desire to be the first to map new tunnels and uncover geological secrets, Andrew White and his team's expedition in Pannikin Plains Cave became a hellish 27-hour ordeal trapped underground rather than the thrilling adventure they had sought. The ambitious expedition was led by Andrew White, one of Australia's most skilled cave divers. Joining White was an assembled team of experts.
And there is no way back to where they started. They have to continue to explore the cave to find their way out.
Their daring objective? To be the first to explore the Pannikin Plains Cave, vast uncharted underwater system lying 50 meters below the surface. The expedition was the cave diving equivalent of climbing Mount Everest, with the team being the first to venture so deeply into the site. They aimed to collect samples and conduct studies in collaboration with the University of Sydney, exploring never-before-accessed areas. The expedition started off eager and excited as the team of divers, researchers, and support crew made their way to the remote Pannikin Plains cave system. The first week was spent setting up camp near the cave entrance and preparing equipment like wetsuits, tanks, helmets, underwater scooters, and more. Safety checks were performed repeatedly to ensure all systems were functioning properly before entering the watery abyss. Once ready, the dive team started cautiously making initial forays into the flooded tunnels and caverns in the first week. By the end of the first week, the team had mapped and recorded details of the first few hundred feet of the cave system. In the second week, the divers pushed further into the submerged caves, laying guidelines and rigging underwater lights to mark their path. They started discovering large chambers and areas where tunnels branched off in different directions. Careful surveys were conducted to log the size and details of each cavern and tunnel while looking for potential routes forward. The most promising paths were marked for further exploration. By now, the team had reached nearly a quarter mile into the cave system and were thrilled with the find so far. The first 2 weeks generated tremendous excitement and motivation to press on and see how far and deep the cave system extended underground. With remarkable progress in the first half-mile of tunnels charted, the expedition couldn't wait to push forward and continue unraveling the mysteries held within the submerged caverns of Pannikin Plains. By the third week, the expedition had made remarkable progress exploring the submerged caverns of Pannikin Plains Cave, pushing over half a mile into the ancient system. They established a sprawling camp at the legendary Concord Landing, an immense cathedral-like cavity 4 stories tall that stretched the length of over half a mile. This site would be their launch point for daring dives into uncharted tunnels branching off the main chamber. From Concord Landing, the most experienced push divers, Andrew, Ron, and Julia, geared up and dropped back into the cave's gaping entrance shaft. Propelling through the chilled waters, the divers traversed a liquid maze of tunnels snaking ever deeper into the cave. They aimed to determine if a promising tunnel they had spotted earlier continued beyond a constricted wide area, holding the secret to unlocking more of the cave's hidden wonders. Fueled by the lure of exploration, Andrew and the crew geared up and dropped back into the cave's gaping entrance shaft. The 7 members of the caving expedition swam through the winding underwater passages, their headlamps cutting through the inky blackness. Andrew White led the team, checking his diving watch every few minutes. They were now over half a mile below the surface and a half mile into the cave system. Andrew signaled for the group to stop at the passage narrowed ahead. He shone his light upwards, illuminating a pile of fallen rocks blocking their path. Andrew checked his air gauge. They were all running low. Divers employ the 3-3-3 rule. You use a third of air to descend, a third of air to ascend, and a third should always be left for emergencies. They were quickly finishing up their reserves for ascending, so they would have to turn back. Disappointment washed over Andrew. He was hoping this passage might lead to the end of the tunnel, but their search would have to wait for another day. Andrew gave the signal to reverse course. The divers began the long swim back through the dark, claustrophobic tunnels, carefully retracing their path as the first glimmers of daylight appeared ahead. Andrew was already planning their next expedition. Little did he know that this fateful decision to keep on pushing would spell doom for him and his crew. 2 days later, after they were denied entrance by the cave, they descended down once again. This time, they would explore all the cave had to offer. Moving through the silent darkness, the team of divers eventually arrived back at the narrow crevice where they had been forced to turn back on their previous expedition. Andrew gave the signal, and one by one, they began squeezing and struggling through the impossibly tight restriction, their diving cylinders scraping against the jagged rocky walls. Gritting his teeth against the intense pressure, Andrew pushed through until finally the passage opened up before them into an immense underwater borehole. Ascending slowly through the dark water column, the divers rose into a towering tunnel. Their lights danced across the walls, but could not even reach the ceiling, shrouded far above them in blackness. A powerful current tugged at them as they swam forward. Pushing deeper into uncharted territory, they explored the newfound passage with growing excitement. Andrew tried to suppress his hopes. They had been disappointed before, but the tunnel kept going and going. Just as they were starting to tire, the tunnel ended abruptly. A massive barricade of collapsed boulders blocked their way completely, like a barrier purposefully placed to stop their progress. Andrew shone his light across the impassable blockade in dismay. There would be no pushing through this. With no choice but to turn back, the team reluctantly began their long return journey through the network of tunnels back to their distant camp at the cave's entrance. Their triumph of discovery had become disappointment once more. They had hoped that they would find even greater secrets behind the rocks, but what they found was another block to their dreams. The cave, however, had one more trick up its sleeve.
The initial exploration of the air caves, the airfill caves, had this excellent collaboration. Now we're going one step further, because even though our scientists can get into the airfill caves and collect samples and test specimens, we cannot get underwater.
As Andrew and his team neared the expedition's end, eager to recount amazing tales of their subterranean discoveries, the Earth had plans of its own, one that would threaten to bury them forever. On the arid plains above, a ferocious storm awoke. 2 years of pent-up rain unleashed in a few frenzied hours, triggering a relentless flood through the porous limestone. In a matter of minutes, millions of gallons of water had infiltrated through minute fractures in the rock. Far below, as Andrew and his team swam through the twisting passages, the rock walls around them began to rumble and crack under the tremendous pressure. Chunks of stone broke free, plunging downward and clouding the water with sediment. Alarmed, they turned back toward the distant entrance, kicking faster now against the strengthening current. Desperately, they sought an escape, searching for some small fissure or tunnel branching off the main passageway. The way behind was completely blocked, and ahead lay only unknown darkness. Their situation seemed hopeless, and the floodwaters continued to rise. Andrew realized with dawning horror that the heavy rainfall had begun to saturate the porous limestone of the cavern's ceilings and walls. Over months and years, slightly acidic rainwater had also gradually eroded fissures into the limestone. Now, the added weight of the waterlogged rock caused stress fractures to split open. The team tried to hurry back to the cavern entrance as rocks and sediments shook loose around them. But soon, the passage ahead was blocked by large boulders. They turned to find another route, but then the deafening vibration of the ground above increased as the rainfall intensified. The passage ceiling behind them gave way in seconds, torn apart by the extreme water pressure inside the saturated cavern. Andrew and his team were trapped deep inside the caves, their exit sealed off by the collapse. The divers realized they would have to find another way out if the unstable cavern passages didn't flood or fully implode first. With oxygen running low, Andrew led them deeper into the treacherous caverns, hoping and praying for a miracle. Now, trapped halfway up the cave's entrance shaft, all routes to the surface were closed behind a collapsed rubble pile. Perched on a fragile ledge, Andrew and Vicky felt the ceiling groan and crack above them, poised to bury them like a giant's fist. Time was not on their side. They faced two harrowing choices: gamble on a rescue through shifting rock and hope fading fast, or plunge into the cave's flooded maze, attempting a desperate crawl to freedom. Ever the bold adventurer, Andrew chose to risk his life and make a run for it. Hope in hand, he went into the abyss, descending into its web of danger.
Alien environment that has all these trials and things that are going to be put in front of that group to prevent them from getting out safely.
With a background in cave diving and rescue missions, Andrew played a crucial role in the intense journey that unfolded beneath the Earth's surface. What followed was an intense escape of swimming, climbing, and clawing through the cave's flooded labyrinth. Their headlamps flickered like dying fires in the murky water, the air thick with fear and the stench of limestone. Ron's faint radio signal pierced the rock somewhere ahead, guiding them like a beacon in this most dangerous of moments. They rationed each sip of water and morsel of food from their packs, their only chance of having enough strength to make it out. The floodwaters continued rising relentlessly around them. They were forced to squeeze through impossibly tight tunnels and sharp rock crevices that ripped their wetsuits. Lungs burning, they finally surfaced in a small upper chamber, gasping for breath. Onward they pressed through the darkness, propelled by rapidly dwindling hope. Just as it seemed their strength might fail, Andrew saw it, a tiny shaft of daylight far above. Time was not on their side. As Andrew took the risk to swim to the cave entrance, boulders the size of small cars were still falling around him. His flashlight had died, and the cave was now nothing but pitch black, using only the guide rope and his instinct to guide him through. He went inch by inch, hoping not to cause another cave-in. He knew time was a precious commodity. The cave systems were still filling with water, and he was not sure how long the others could stay in that pocket of air in the cave. Against all odds, Andrew painstakingly swam across the chasm between falling debris and rocks in a few hours to reach the surface to call for help. It was a rush against time before the others who were trapped underground ran out of water and oxygen, for this was a ticking time bomb. The cave could collapse in on itself any time. Upon arriving 32 minutes later, the rescue team focused on establishing communication with the 14 cavers still trapped underground. Fortunately, they were able to contact the trapped individuals using two-way radio capable of transmitting signals through solid rock. Despite being buried deep underground, the trapped cavers remained brave and optimistic, having rationed their limited food and water supplies. The rescuers began their descent into the cave's depths. All too soon, they found themselves squeezed inside nightmare nightmarish tunnels that squeezed their bodies. The sharp walls closed in. Darkness enveloped them. Pressing forward, the team grappled with concealed underground cave systems that added layers of unpredictability and danger. One of the rescuers went on to say that an overwhelming sense of dread came over the rescuers as the cave's twisted passages carried them deeper into the cave's bowels. It was easy to let panic take over their minds, knowing that one wrong turn could leave them just as trapped as those they sought. The tension reached its peak as rescuers reached the team's former camp at Concord Landing. Their breathing grew more labored as they inched ahead into the claustrophobic darkness. At one point, the team found themselves trapped in a rapidly flooding chamber as a result of the rain, but they had to keep pushing on to retrieve the 14 trapped divers. But the determination to save their fellow cavers kept them crawling ahead through the brutal subterranean maze. 27 agonizing hours passed before the first missing diver was finally spotted, battered and delirious from lack of food and water. One by one, the search teams located the others, also weak and disoriented, but miraculously still clinging to life. Strapping oxygen masks to the divers' faces, the rescuers guided them through the treacherous terrain. The journey to the surface was grueling, requiring another 15 painstaking hours. But eventually, all 15 emerged back into daylight, where medical teams awaited to treat them. Though they had narrowly escaped with their lives, the divers' ordeal left lasting scars. Some struggled with memories of the harrowing experience, plagued by panic attacks and nightmares. A majority of the crew trapped underneath the caves suffered from severe compression sickness, as well as different forms of PTSD that rendered them unable to continue cave exploring. Later, Andrew co-wrote the fictional film Sanctum, loosely based on Pannikin Plains and his cave diving expertise. This was Australia's highest-grossing film in 2011. He collaborated with James Cameron on underwater documentaries and 3D ocean exploration films before his tragic death in a helicopter accident in 2012. The legacy of the expedition itself showcases how events can profoundly shape communities.